Our goal in this should be, how do we get as many people as possible on the road to self-sufficiency?
Welcome to Face Chicago. I'm Debbie Frazier. Today my guest is State Senator Dan McConchie. We're going to talk about faith and politics and about Illinois' finances. Senator McConchie is a Republican representing the 26th District. Our conversation took place last year shortly after the state legislature passed a budget following a historic 2 years without one. Governor Rauner vetoed the budget, but 10 Republicans broke ranks to join the Democrats in overriding his veto. We started our conversation talking about that long 2-year standoff. Let's just go right into it.
Sure.
State budget, 2 years.
Yep.
Why did it take so long? And what is your opinion on how it passed?
As you said, it was a historic stalemate. And this was something where what the governor had indicated was, I'm willing to sign a budget that would have a tax increase only if there are reforms that go along with it that would help us to create jobs and keep people here in this state. There are a few facts that a lot of people don't know. For example, we have one of the highest overall tax burdens. If you count our local and state tax burdens, one of the highest overall in the country and the highest in the Midwest. We're the only state in the Midwest that actually has more people moving out of the state than are moving in. You know, the Democrats were insistent we have to have a tax increase. We can't cut spending enough to reach a balanced budget on our own. We have to have more taxes. And the governor said, I'm only going to sign a tax increase if there are reforms to go along with it that help attract businesses and jobs to Illinois. It doesn't do anything to address our long-term unfunded liabilities, over $100 billion in unfunded pensions and things like this, bills that we have to pay at some point. We're obligated to pay these. We don't have a revenue source to be able to do that. We're still deficit spending. And the credit rating agencies are saying, kind of taking a wait-and-see approach right now.
So you think there could have been a much better compromise?
Oh, absolutely. But, you know, unfortunately, there are special interest groups, particularly trial lawyers and certain segments of the unions, especially public sector unions, who have said, you know, absolutely no to certain types of reforms that business say we absolutely have to have in order. Workers' compensation, a lot of people don't know what that is. That is one of the biggest cost drivers for business. I've talked to businesses that do manufacturing, maybe in the south side of Chicago or in the south suburbs, move over to Indiana, save $1 million a year on that alone. That doesn't count their property tax bill. Property taxes, our property taxes, 2 to 3 times higher what people are paying, right? I had a pastor who just took a church in Indiana, is paying 1/3 in property taxes of what he was paying on, you know, up here in our area.
So school funding reform, that's another hot button.
Sure, this is a debate that has been going on for a number of years, and the reason why is because we fund education at the lowest level from the state of any state in the country, yet we have the biggest inequities. One of the reasons why our property taxes are so high is because 60 to 70% of your local property tax bill goes to fund your local schools. And that creates vast inequities. So very property-rich areas have great schools, and those that don't have a lot of wealthy areas or commercial areas don't have enough money to operate their schools. And so it creates areas where some kids get a great education and some kids are barely getting out of high school. And it's very inequitable, and we need a way to be able to get it so every child gets a good education regardless of their zip code.
Well, we have a lot more. There's much more to discuss, including how faith and politics mix. And I'm going to ask Senator McConchie to talk about what role government should play in our lives. That's coming up after the break. Welcome back to Face Chicago. Today my guest is Illinois Senator Dan McConchie from the Illinois 26th District. And so glad you're with us. What role should the government play in our lives, do you think?
Well, my view is as small as possible. Let me tell a story, okay? And maybe that's the best way of illustrating. I have a friend who almost 20 years ago got pregnant out of wedlock, decided she was going to have an abortion, decided not to, went to try to get on welfare, And she was rejected because she was able-bodied. This was shortly after welfare reform passed, when President Clinton worked with the Republican Congress to come up with a bipartisan effort to try to address the welfare problem that we had in this country. And when she was rejected from welfare, she went to the church to get help because she needed help. She had 2 other kids she needed care for and try to get a job. And she speaks about it, and she says, if I had gotten government aid, I would have never gotten the real assistance that I needed, which was the spiritual and emotional help that I needed. When I was forced to go to the church for my physical and material needs, that's when I opened the door to be able to get those other things I really needed. And so we need to be very careful of entrusting in government too much to take care of society's problems, because many of our society's problems have baked into it a spiritual problem, right? They have baked into it emotional issues that government simply can't address. And that's why it's vitally important that the church be intrinsically involved in addressing these societal ills. And so that's why, I think that there's certainly a place for government to be able to, we need to have a safety net, make sure people aren't starving on the streets, make sure people aren't homeless and such, but we need to make sure that the causes that end up driving people into those situations in which they need that kind of assistance are able to be addressed. And really, I believe it's the church that is the best actor to be able to address that.
And I agree with you on that. And but on another point, do you feel your friend was well served? Was that the right answer for her?
She believes it was for her.
All right. Should churches be political? You just talked about a service of a church that is basically just that, a service. That's what a church does. It helps. What about the political arena? How should a church get involved in that, or should they remain outside?
Well, each church is going to have to make that decision on their own. I think that certainly there are fundamental moral issues of our time that the church, it's vital for them to stand up and do. We've seen this historically. We saw when the church stood up against slavery. It was vital for them to get involved in that role. When they stood up against Jim Crow laws and things with racism and such, those were important times in which that moral standing, Martin Luther King was a pastor who stood up as a pastor saying this is a violation of this is wrong, right? This is something that's a violation of who we are as human beings made in the image of God. And so it's vitally important that the church is involved in standing up for truth in that fashion. Also important for them to be standing up in providing that holistic solution for the people that need it to be able to get them onto the path of being able to have a productive relationship with the Lord as well as with the fellow people around them.
All right. Some Republicans feel you cannot be Democrat and Christian, and some Democrats believe you cannot be Republican and Christian. I mean, this is pretty hot topic right now.
Sure, it is.
How should we address that? What do you think?
Well, by example, we frequently will have a prayer meeting at the Capitol, and we invite anyone who is a believer, no matter party, to be able to show up and participate. And frankly, some of the people who are, I'll say, most dedicated are people who are dedicated to showing up and praying sincerely and honestly for the Lord to get involved and help us through the issues and things that we're facing, are people on the other side of the aisle. And I welcome that. I think that if you believe that you can't be a Democrat and Christian or a Republican and a Christian, that's when you're taking the ideology that underlies that party's philosophy and really placing it above the gospel. For me, the gospel's first. If my party ever does something, or when they do something that I believe stands against the tenets of the gospel, I reject that and will stand up against my party for what they're doing.
What is social justice to you? We have 1 minute.
Social justice is only 1 minute.
We can get started and finish it after the break.
So social justice is where we are doing, in my opinion, it's where we take this holistic approach to solving people's problems. It's not just addressing their physical needs, but it's addressing their mental, emotional, and spiritual needs. Their spiritual needs have to be a part of that component. And it is then exercising truth in ensuring that people in a holistic fashion are able to be right with the Lord and be right with the other people around them, whether it's their family, whether it's their community, or whether it's just the humanity at large.
So we all can move forward, and so they can move forward.
Absolutely,
And grow.
right.
All right. More with Senator McConchie, including how faith is viewed inside Springfield. And I'll ask the Senator about tolerance in America today, so we'll be right back. Pastor Corey Brooks of New Beginnings Church is known for his passion and activism. He's controversial too. He questions political philosophy that keeps the poor dependent. Here's what he had to say about what we should expect from our elected leaders, the difference between the two parties, and compassion.
Let me be very honest about the parties when it comes to poverty. I believe that they both are compassionate. I just believe that the way they deal with their compassion is totally different. I think that the Democrats are concerned about pulling people out of poverty. I think that the Republicans are concerned about pulling people out of poverty. But their concepts and their philosophies are totally different in how they go about it. You have a Democratic Party that believes in bigger government, believes in more involvement, believes in that the government has to be your babysitter. But I believe those type of thoughts sometimes can damage you, sometimes can hinder you progressing. Whereas the Republican thought is sometimes that we need to help you and then remove ourselves from you. We don't want to attach ourselves to you for life. And unlike Democrats who believe that government has to be there for your whole entire life, a Republican would probably say, no, we want less government. We don't want to be totally involved in an individual's life. We want them to experience their freedoms. We want them to experience free markets and get involved in society. And those are some differences when it comes to how we deal with poverty. We should expect from our politicians to assist the community, to assist the people, to come alongside and help them to be the best that the community can be. That does not mean giving them handouts, but it does mean sometimes giving them a hand up. And I think the more accountability that we can have with our politicians to make sure that they represent people and represent the communities that they come from, the better off we can be. But it's all about the accountability, and it's all about making sure that we hold our politicians' feet to the fire to make sure that they do the things that they need to do for their constituents.
Senator Dan McConchie from 26th District is my guest today. What do you have to say about what Pastor Brooks just commented on?
He's somebody who's obviously worked in this sphere a very long time, and I think he hit the nail on the head, exactly what that is. I have yet to meet a politician in Springfield or someone, running for office for Washington, D.C., who doesn't think that they're trying to do what's best for the people, right? The issue for me at the end of the day is, what does the data show that works? What's our goal? And our goal in this should be, how do we get as many people as possible on the road to self-sufficiency? Which I think is, everybody wants to be that, everyone, I think we should agree, everyone should want to be that. Maybe not everyone actually does, wants to be it, but everyone should want to be that. The question is, how do we best get them there? And I think that is really what we do struggle with. There are some people who some people will argue can never become self-sufficient. I think there is a debate over whether or not that, we need to understand, there may be some people with certain addictions, mental illness, those types of issues. What do we do about those people in those situations? Very difficult debate. But those things, I think we should take those people and talk about them in one conversation, and take those people who don't have those kind of barriers that would keep them from becoming self-sufficient. And how do we instill in them the desire, the work ethic, and the recognition that America has this great ramp, that if you pursue your dream, you can be somebody. Even Kanye West, the rapper, has talked about the importance of economic freedom. He said, you don't have freedom unless you have economic freedom. And economic freedom means this opportunity that someone like him from an inner city can become a superstar. That is what the uniqueness of America, and that is something that is important that we don't lose. We need to capitalize upon that going forward.
Often it's just being able to believe in yourself, having someone else believe in you and help you get to that next place.
You know, there's a ministry that's in the city that, you know, one of the things they established a women's shelter, and then a men's shelter, and then a family shelter. The next thing they realized they needed to do was establish a business, because they had a lot of people who were coming back to the community. Sometimes they would get out of prison and then come back, and they couldn't get hired by anybody, or they needed to develop job
Same
skills.
routine.
Right. And so instead of going back into the drug trade, you know, they are establishing right now, they're working to establish a business so that they can get them a job there doing packaging. And so then they teach them some job skills, get them some work experience, maybe 2-3 years, and then they are then able to go and apply for other jobs, having demonstrated a willingness to be able to work. We need to have more programs like that, more opportunities for people to give them that first step.
All right. You are a Christian in politics. I'd like to talk about that when we come back. Questions for Senator McConchie on corruption in politics after the break, and we'll hear his story, so stay with us. Illinois Senator Dan McConchie is my guest today. Senator McConchie represents the 26th District. Dan has a long record of public service, joining the Army National Guard at 17 years old and serving in the infantry and military police. Quite a background you have before you got in politics.
Well, it was something that, you know, I was very interested in serving my country, and also we, you know, grew up poor down in the southern part of the Indiana-Illinois border, right along there, and farm country. And this was a way of being able to pay for college. And but I stayed in for 9 years, really enjoyed my time there. The camaraderie and the discipline that it instills in you. The discipline was very important.
How does your faith inform your political views?
So I operate everything from a gospel-first perspective. I go to Springfield on the regular basis, and my primary concern is not what kind of temporal win are we going to get here. Are we going to get a budget that's more to my liking than it is to our opponent's liking? That's not my concern. My concern is, how do I stand up for truth in what I'm doing today? How do I shine the light of Christ to those people around me? I pray for opportunities to be able to speak to people who don't know the Lord, and be able to either talk about my own faith or be able to just address problems and concerns that they're having, because they have real lives too, right? Real issues and problems, and sometimes they'll just confide in me. I've had people on the other side of the aisle, you know, actually kind of end up in tears talking about problems that they're having, and then just be able to kind of pray with them. I've done that before. And that is kind of most important for me as do I approach it. In regards to my political views, you know, I approach things where, you know, I value the sanctity of human life, the value of the individual person, everyone being made in the image of God, having value, everyone having equal value. As a result, I believe everyone deserves to have a shot, has an opportunity. When we talked about education a little bit ago, on that issue, I believe every child deserves to have a quality education, a shot toward career and college readiness when they graduate. That comes out of my faith and the belief that they are endowed just as much with the Spirit of God as I am.
How do other politicians view your opinions in that way?
Well, you know, some people come across very in a bombastic fashion. I don't do that. I just express my views as here's what I am, but I'm very open to hearing your views. I'm very clear as to what foundation my perspective comes from, and so the responses that I get is that they appreciate and they value the honesty and the fact that I have a well thought through perspective, but that I'm also willing to listen to others, and I'm not just approaching it thinking I know it all and I'm going to force that on them.
Do you think that religious liberty is in danger in our country?
Absolutely. Religious liberty is in danger. This is something where, especially where we have speech codes and things like this, where people are saying that speech offends me. I shouldn't have to listen to that because I don't want to, that if that gets rooted in our country, if that philosophy gets hold in our country, then it becomes tyranny of whatever's the loudest group saying, I don't want to hear your perspective. So if you come to me and I don't want to hear about Jesus, I mean, I don't want to hear about the gospel, I don't want to hear about the truth that your God has, that can have a very chilling effect on free speech and our religious liberty. You know, we're called to live our faith outwardly at work, at our places of play, where our kids go to school. We are called to live it out in all of those spheres, not just keep it within the walls of the four walls of the church. And that's what our opponents would like us to stay.
And to have tolerance for each other, basically, is what you're saying.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, right.
What is your hope for Illinois?
You know, the big problem that we have here is the hyper-partisanship, the idea that politics is the end game, and we have these players who have been involved in politics here for decades who this is their game, and they control the state, they control the city of Chicago through this, and they manage the power of this. We need to break that power back and restore honor to public service. The best way of doing that is for people of faith, the church, to be able to rise up and say, no, we need people of honor in these roles again. And people who, whether they be Republican or Democrat, but they're honorable, they're trustworthy, and they get into a room and they're always an honest broker when they're dealing with people from the other side. We have so much here as far as infrastructure. We could be the best state in the Midwest if we could just get out of our own way.
Well, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you.
My thanks to Senator Dan McConchie for joining me today and for his commitment to serving the people of Illinois. We need more elected officials like the senator who serve with integrity, faith, and humility. We at Faith Chicago want to serve you too. If you have a prayer need, call our Care Force toll-free and contact us at Faith Chicago if you have suggestions for topics or guests to include on this program. Thanks for watching, and please consider partnering with us. This ministry is donor-supported. We'll see you again next time on Faith Chicago.